Today, Moscow mourns. Russian President Vladimir Putin himself among the many lighting candles. After Russia endured its deadliest terror attack in 20 years on Friday, I honestly thought it was a firecracker, said this survivor, but these crackles, they were here. They weren't stopping. There was screaming, panic. At least 137 people were killed by 4 gunmen who marauded through this huge concert venue, shooting, throwing bombs, and burning the building almost completely to the ground.
So on Friday, 137 people, including 3 children, were killed in that terrorist attack at Moscow's Crocus City Hall, according to Russia's investigative committee. But there's a lot more details unfolding as the number of people injured is 182, 121 are still in the hospital. Search for bodies is ongoing. What we do know is the auditorium at the Crocus Hall was about 3/4 full when, with a crowd waiting to see Picnic, which is a popular band since the Soviet days of the early 80s. But the concert was sold out in a 6,200 seat hall. So some of the audience was still likely getting food or shedding their heavy coats in the cloakroom. And about 7 to 10 minutes before the start of the show, which was scheduled for 8 o'clock, that popping sound of guns rang out, and 4 khaki-clad men with automatic weapons opened fire on those in the hall. The Islamic State claimed responsibility first Friday and then again on Saturday on social media channels that they typically use to issue statements. In their Saturday statement, they said the attack had come in the quote natural framework of the ongoing war between the extremist group and the countries they accuse of fighting Islam. That would be, in this case, Russia. They're specifically, it's ISIS-K, which is a Central Asian affiliate of the Islamic State group. ISIS-K has thousands of members and is the Taliban's most bitter enemy and top military threat. The group has continued to carry out attacks in Afghanistan and beyond since the Taliban takeover. I'm sure folks remember they were behind that 2021 suicide bombing at the Kabul airport that left 13 US troops and 170 Afghans dead during the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. ISIS-K also claimed responsibility for the bombing attack in Kerman, Iran, that killed 95 people in January at a memorial procession for General Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian general who was killed by US drone strike in 2020. US officials are saying that ISIS-K has long targeted Russia. This is from Colin Clark of the Sufan Center, says that ISIS-K has been fixated on Russia for the past 2 years, frequently criticizing Putin and its propaganda. And Michael Kugelman, of the Washington-based Wilson Center said, ISIS-K sees Russia as being complicit in activities that regularly oppress Muslims. I did wanna jump down because there was an interesting continuation of Michael Kugelman, who's been speaking out about this, spoke to Al Jazeera, said that Russian foreign policy has been a big red flag for ISIS. He again is the South Asia Institute director for the Washington-based Wilson Center. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Russian actions in Chechnya, Moscow's close relationships with Syria and the Iranian governments, and especially the military campaigns that Russia has waged against ISIS fighters in Syria and through the Wagner Group mercenaries in parts of Africa. Now, that is their rationale and also their particular take on Islam and who is targeting Muslims, right? Obviously, Iran is a Muslim nation. So again, and ISIS is a particular strand of extremist organization, but it's pretty nuts. I mean, there was talk initially after the attack that maybe this was coming from Ukraine, obviously given the war, but there was nothing to back that up. But Waz, here we are again, and I think there's gonna be a lot of fallout from this, but I wanna just kick it to you before we talk about who has been suspected of doing this.
It's obviously horrible what's happened to those people who lost their lives in this attack, and our thoughts go out to their families in this time because obviously this is just horrible. However, this is kind of what happens when extremist factions kind of decide they want to deal a blow to the great powers, right? We know these guys, they can't go out in the fields in that region and fight a Russian army or a Russian-backed, Syrian army head up. They can't. They will get their doors blown off, and they know that quite explicitly. And so they feel like how they attack the Russians for, what they see as oppression of the Chechen Muslims and definitely the sort of Islamic State-backed forces in Syria. Because pretty much from the start of that uprising, the Russian government has backed Bashar al-Assad in Syria pretty strongly. I feel like they've been his strongest ally from the beginning. The Johnny-come-latelys in the US, when they finally decided that ISIS was a problem, they kind of collaborated on, kicking those guys out of that region. But Russia has been heavily involved from the beginning, and these extremist folks feel like, all right, these guys are our enemies, and this is the only way that we see we can hurt them is by targeting their civilian populations at home. Obviously, this is an atrocity. Obviously, it's wholly unjustified, but this is what these type of groups do when they feel like foreign powers, who they have absolutely no chance of beating head to head, have wronged them and their people, and they feel like this is how they, strike a blow.
Right. I mean, I think you pretty much just define terrorism, which is, non-state actors taking it out on civilians, sort of in an act of desperation or extremism. 4 of the 11 who were arrested, I guess 11 were, and again, there will be more unfolding, but it seems that 4 gunmen have been arrested, but there may have been more. You heard in that report that there were 4. It's believed that there more were involved, but again, it's unfolding. But 4 of the 11 were identified as Tajik nationals, and they've been arraigned and charged already under a terrorism act in Russia, and that carries a life sentence in prison. However, some conditions on how they actually came to that confession are raising eyebrows. A court statement said that 2 of the suspects accepted their guilt in the assault after being charged with in the preliminary hearing. Though the men's condition raised questions about whether they were speaking freely, there had been earlier conflicting reports in Russian media outlets that said 3 of the 4 men admitted culpability. The reason their condition raised some ideas and questions about whether they were speaking freely is that they clearly had been tortured. They had signs of heavy bruising, swollen faces. One guy didn't have an ear because it had been cut off during interrogation. So again, we'll keep following this story. It will be unfolding. Vladimir Putin is still somehow trying to blame Ukraine for this. But it is really scary, Waz. I think to me what stands out is Putin's government is one that Tucker Carlson and the right in this country love. They praise, right? And there is no due process when it comes to what, if you're accused of an act of terrorism, no, you're getting your ear cut off, you're gonna be tortured, tortured into confessing, who knows? And that's it, life, goodbye. This country, at least there is due process and the rule of law. In addition to, as I pointed out on the damage report this morning, if you're Dylan Roof for a white domestic terrorist, you might get a Burger King thrown in with that before you actually get charged. But it's that separation that I think those of us who still trying to work on the whole justice system in this so-called democracy, that's what we want to preserve, not the presumption of guilt or even the torturing of, let's say these people do have blood on their hands. They should be tried and sentenced in accordance with law, and not what was that in 2 days? 2 days.
Yeah, see, I don't think civil liberties have ever been a specialty of Russian authorities. This probably goes back for about 100 years now. That hasn't seemed to be a priority. However, where I might disagree with you a bit, and where we cede the moral high ground very often, and when I say we, I mean the American foreign policy establishment. Putin's no dummy. He knows he can go on any outlet and say, have you guys ever heard of Gitmo? You think those guys get fair trials with due process, a speedy trial, get lawyers, get released, get any of that? No, they don't. Putin will come out and say, the Americans do this all the time. They had their little CIA black sites. They were torturing the hell out of people at those things. And that's why I feel like a lot of the these steps that we took during the quote unquote war on terror has weakened us abroad. People look at America as very suspect in their claims to have some moral high ground. When push came to shove, after 9/11, we wiretapped the hell out of our own citizens. Whenever we accuse anybody of being a terrorist, they didn't get to go to a court in New York City or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. We tried these folks abroad, right? And that's not even to speak of, President Obama killing American citizens with drone strikes. No judge, no jury, no court, no anything, right? And so I think that's our problem that we stand in right now, as far as the American establishment, as it relates to foreign policy. They've done so many horrible things. We can't even come out and in good faith explain to people that what the Russians are doing are horrible, because we come up to that line very often.
No, I think you're 100% right. I think that's a really not just fair point, that is the point. And especially if they're Muslim, right? Like that is the difference. When I say Dylan Roof, that dude wasn't brown or Muslim, but when they are, and especially if they have actual ties abroad or to an ISIS or like organization, you're 100% right. I mean, there are still people languishing in Guantanamo. So point taken and great point.
All right, thanks for watching this free clip of Old School. Don't forget to become a TYT member today for the rest of the show and for more exclusive content throughout the network. Join now at tyt.com/join.